Thanks for coming to the session. Today we're going to talk about the insider cybersecurity insights from medical device pre-market success. I'm Christian Espinosa. I'm the founder and CEO of Blue Goat Cyber. A little bit of a question to begin with, and this is the question a lot of people, medical device manufacturers, struggle with, is how confident are you that your device's cybersecurity strategy will meet the FDA expectations the first time? Most device manufacturers are not very confident, and what happens is they submit for a 510K or PMA submission to the FDA, and they get a deficiency response in terms of cybersecurity. And of course, this relates to a lot of cost overruns and is very expensive. Some manufacturers are pretty confident, but they don't know what they don't know. A little bit about me, as I mentioned, I'm Christian Espinosa. I've been involved with the medical device industry since 2014. So about 10 years now. My first cybersecurity company, Alpine Security, we did medical device cybersecurity and we did other types of cybersecurity. I sold Alpine Security in 2020 to a publicly traded company. And while I was working for that publicly traded company, I had sort of this health scare. I was doing like burpees in my basement. I did 120 burpees. And I noticed like the back of my left leg started hurting. And I was in really good shape. I'd done like 24 Ironman triathlons, some ultra marathons, and like I said, I did 120 burpees. So I thought I just pulled a muscle. A friend of mine told me I should go to the hospital. She said, "You may have blood clots." I'm like, whatever, blood clots don't happen to people like me. I'm an Ironman athlete. So I went to the hospital, and thanks to a portable Doppler ultrasound device, they were able to quickly identify blood clots in my left leg. I had 6 of them. Not just one, it was 6. Not a good thing to hear. Obviously, it's very life-altering. I couldn't run, I couldn't travel, I couldn't do anything I like to do. So I went through a little bit of a bout of depression, but when I came out of that, I thought, maybe this is the universe telling me something, because without that device, I may not be here. So I decided to spin off the medical device cybersecurity section of the parent company and for Blue Goat Cyber and focus specifically on medical device cybersecurity. Because I believe the devices out there are can be life-saving, and they're very important. And I would hate for a device like that ultrasound to be recalled because somebody hacked into it, or for it to get a false diagnosis. A little bit about Blue Goat Cyber. We've helped hundreds of manufacturers get their devices cleared through the FDA. From a cybersecurity perspective, we do full-service cybersecurity. We also work with a lot of deficiency responses. As I mentioned in that question earlier, a lot of companies will try to do the cybersecurity submission on their own, or they'll pick a vendor that doesn't really understand medical device cybersecurity. It's very different than traditional cybersecurity. So then when they do the submission, they get a deficiency kickback, and we help them address those deficiencies. We worked with just about every type of medical device, implantables, robots, pretty much every class 2 and class 3 device there is. We've touched a device very similar. We have a 100% success rate, so we've never got a deficiency kickback for a submission that we have worked on the cybersecurity requirements for. And if we do, for some reason the 100% success rate drops, we will address that deficiency free of charge. We offer a guarantee from a cybersecurity submission perspective. So what's the big deal with cybersecurity? Well, as you probably know, most medical devices now are increasing in their connectivity. There's some studies that say by next year, almost 68 or 70% of medical devices will be interconnected in some way. This means Wi-Fi, it could mean Bluetooth, it could mean NFC, it could be RFID, it could be any number of methods. But the challenge is with these more connections, these are more entry points or ways a cyber criminal or an attacker could get into the device. So now we have to look at all these entry points. It's no longer a self-contained device. And this includes physical entry points such as a USB port or an HDMI port or any like physical interface as well. The other thing that's making cybersecurity no longer optional is ransomware attacks. Ransomware attacks have been on the rise, as you know. If a ransomware hits a healthcare delivery organization, which we consider hostile environments, hospital environments are not very secure, but medical devices are on that environment. So if that hospital environment or the HDO environment becomes infected, then the medical device may become infected as well if if it does not have strong security. And if that device is infected, now we have it inoperable. And if it's like an IVD device, in vitro diagnostics, now it can no longer diagnose someone's tissue sample or blood sample, which can cause dire consequences. Some of you probably heard about some of these vulnerabilities, the Medtronic insulin pump recall. So this vulnerability, attackers were able to remotely connect to the insulin pump and alter the insulin delivery, which could have life-threatening risk. Pacemakers, there's been a lot of pacemakers and defibrillators recalled. And again, an attacker has been able to remotely connect to a pacemaker because they typically have Bluetooth enabled and alter the pacemaker's functionality. And we already talked about ransomware, but the WannaCry ransomware is really what elevated a lot of this as well and brought cybersecurity to the limelight. It took a lot of devices offline. And because of all these things we're talking about, the FDA is like finally caught up and said, maybe we should do something about this. So in September 2023, they greatly increased the cybersecurity requirements. And that's just a snippet on the screen of the document, the pre-market guidance. And this really caught a lot of manufacturers off guard, because what used to get through the FDA now no longer will get through the FDA. You have to do a lot more due diligence and risk assessment with cybersecurity. And some of the things they're mandating now are a threat model, a software bill of materials, a secure product development framework. So the FDA wants to know, like, you develop your software securely from design to disposal, the whole life cycle. They also want us to do post-market monitoring now. So once the device is cleared, that's not good enough. We have to also, when it's fielded, monitor for new vulnerabilities, because vulnerabilities are constantly evolving and exploits are constantly evolving. So we have to continuously monitor our devices once they've been cleared and fielded. I'm going to focus on the top 5 reasons people get their submissions kicked back. These are the top 5 reasons we've seen out of hundreds of submissions. And typically the FDA doesn't give a lot of great guidance. It'll say, you're missing this or it's inadequate. They don't tell you exactly what to do. And this is a frustrating topic for a lot of people. The FDA's guidance is very ambiguous. So the first one is threat modeling. People altogether skip threat modeling or don't understand what it is. Software bill of materials. This is all the third-party components that make up your software, because developers borrow pieces of code from other places. So we want to know the lineage of all the code. A big one we see is safety-focused risk methodology. So the risk methodology needs to be focused on patient safety. A lot of medical device manufacturers will hire a normal cybersecurity company, and they have a risk methodology that does not focus on patient safety. So then when they submit it, it gets kicked back. Also, we need to include cybersecurity early on in the design. So all phases, the sooner the better. And it's mandated you have third-party penetration testing. And I'm going to cover these in a little more detail. Here's some of the examples of deficiencies we've seen. These are actual deficiencies. I've just highlighted a couple things here. The first one did not provide threat modeling. Second one did not provide the software bill of materials. Third one did not include vulnerability tests and penetration testing. So this is a common theme we see. So what is threat modeling? So threat modeling is identifying vulnerabilities and what we call entry points into your device or your system. This is a diagram, a threat model diagram from one of our clients. And you see the system has the dotted line around it. That's called the trust boundary. So this is your system. But anything that can get through that trust boundary, like in this one, it has Bluetooth, low emission, RFID, even the touchscreen interface. Any way somebody can interact with your device through the trust boundary needs to be assessed for vulnerabilities. And we need to come up with an exhaustive list of test cases to make sure that that product is secure. Like in this one, it has Bluetooth low emission. So when we tested it, we came up with every single way someone could try to break into Bluetooth low emission, and then if they did, what could they alter on the device? And this is called the attack surface from an attacker perspective. The other thing that the FDA wants you to use is this thing called STRIDE. It's an acronym. Microsoft created it. So this is a way of looking at threats. Like, can the threat cause spoofing? Because it cause tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, elevation of privilege. What are the things we can do if we realize this threat? And in traditional cybersecurity, we are much more concerned about information disclosure, like protecting credit card information, or with HIPAA, PHI. With medical devices, that's secondary. It's almost like, who cares about that stuff? What we care about mainly is integrity or denial of service. Because if I can alter the algorithm on a device, and that device is used to diagnose a blood sample, and someone has sepsis, for instance, and I can alter the device to say they don't have sepsis, now create a scenario where that toxic blood could actually kill the patient. Or denial of service, if there is a delay in the diagnosis because the device went offline because of ransomware or something, now the doctor may not have the information to make a diagnosis, which could result in patient harm as well. This is a little bit busy. This is just a table that matches the threat model. One of the things you can see here are the third one down. We have to look at the software supply chain, and that's through the SBOM. So anytime somebody develops software, they borrow other pieces of software. Now we have to look at the pieces of software we borrowed. Does that software have a vulnerability? And if so, what is the risk associated with it? And this is part of what we do, is look at the entry point, which I talked about, the threat. We have the test cases for it. We have what it maps to as stride. And we have the result, if someone was able to realize that threat. And then what the mitigation is, along with like the risk level. The second thing is that software bill of materials. I kind of talked about this a little bit, but really we're talking about supply chain risk. Developers are lazy, and if someone has an open source piece of code, which means anybody can use it, that performs a function you need in your code, why not just use that versus write your own function? The challenge is, if we've borrowed all these pieces of code and put it into our proprietary code, if we don't know where they all came from, and all of a sudden a vulnerability pops up, we don't know our system is vulnerable. This movement for an SBOM stems from this thing called shell shock. Some of you may have heard of it. A lot of medical devices used an open source function called bash, and they didn't have an SBOM. So imagine you're the consumer, you're the one using that device. You don't know that bash is on that device, so you don't know that device is vulnerable. And there's no traceability with that. So there's a movement to have traceability and transparency. It's kind of like if you buy like a lasagna at the store or something, you want to know what's in it, right? That's what the SBOM is. You buy the software, you want to know what other things are in it. So that provides that transparency. This is just an example of SBOM. You can go to Slack. Slack has theirs public. A lot of manufacturers have concerns that the software bill of materials is going to divulge their intellectual property. It does not. It is just the third-party things that make up your software. It does not divulge any of your IP. There's a question here. How confident are you that every component of your SBOM is being continuously monitored? Because we talked about continuously monitoring. Just because you have an SBOM, that's not good enough. Because as I mentioned, vulnerabilities change every day. New exploits come out. People are doing nefarious things and they try to attack things all the time. So even though your SBOM today might not have any vulnerabilities, tomorrow, one of the third-party components may have been exploited, which changes your risk profile. The third thing is the patient safety risk methodology. With medical devices, the risk methodology has to align with patient safety. That is the most important thing. Most risk methodologies do not align with patient safety, and they do not focus on exploitability, which is what the FDA wants as well. Most people look at information disclosure, like HIPAA. But from our perspective, who cares? All of your health data has already been stolen anyway. So, we should still care about information disclosure, but it's secondary to integrity and to causing harm to the patient. Because a surgical robot, which we're evolving to autonomous surgical robots, if that thing is hacked and is doing surgery on your spine, it can cause grave harm, right? This is an example of our risk matrix, and this is what the FDA wants. You see on the left side there is exploitability score. We see a lot of submissions get kicked back because people are using, on the left side, probability or likelihood. That is a traditional risk matrix, has probability and impact. Risk is the intersection of probability and impact. The FDA wants medical device manufacturers to steer away from probability and likelihood because it's too subjective, and go to something like exploitability, which CVSS is a tool you can use to figure out how exploitable something is, which is more objective, which makes our risk assessment more accurate. The impact, as I mentioned, should tie into patient safety. I highlighted here the three things here for low. A low risk causes temporary discomfort for a patient. Medium, temporary injury requiring medical attention. High, life-threatening injury with significant impairment. So when we look at the risk here, we have to have them tied back to the effect on a patient if that risk is realized. The fourth one is not including cybersecurity at the beginning. A lot of device manufacturers will come to us and they'll say, we don't need your services because we're just starting. We're gonna wait till we're about 2 months away from our 510(k) submission. Guess what? That is a bad idea. We had one company come to us, same scenario. They made a design decision early on, like a year and a half earlier, to use a specific microcontroller that did not support secure boot. So when they came to us, the FDA requires this thing called secure boot for code integrity. They didn't want to redo everything, so they had to turn off the cellular function of their device, disable the cloud feature, and submit their device as a standalone device. With the idea, the next iteration, they'll swap out the motherboards, the microcontrollers, and then add the cellular and the cloud feature. So now they have a device that's standalone, so they're not able to gather analytics from it or monitor patients from it. Again, if they would have talked to us earlier, we could have guided them with that design decision. So as soon as you start the project, you should look at cybersecurity. Don't wait to the end. Cybersecurity designed in is much more secure than cybersecurity bolted on at the very end. The other thing that is a common misnomer, and I've got 30 years experience, I've supervised a lot of software developers, they do not understand cybersecurity. A lot of people think software developers understand cybersecurity. There may be like 0.05% that I've met. Software developers, if you think about it, they are tasked with building something that works and looks pretty. Cybersecurity professionals like my team, we're tasked with breaking something and making it do what it wasn't designed to do. So we're looking at it through a very different lens. It's a very different skill set.
Remember when we were doing a pre-call discussion, for the session, it's interesting because I imagine especially with like startups, that's kind of the idea. It's well, that's why we have software developers. They know what needs to be done to protect them, but it doesn't sound like it works that way.
Only in 0.5% of the time, in my experience. Yes. For some reason, software developers, even today in college, are not taught how to write code securely. We're sort of slowly moving that direction because all of our problems are related to poor software development practices from a security perspective, but we're not there. Yeah, and it's like I said, it's a common misnomer. People think, well, they're techies, they should know this stuff, but a very different skill set. Yeah.
Going with a general burn of cybersecurity, it's not going to do it.
No, it will not, and that's a common problem. A lot of prospects we deal with and clients that went with somebody before us, they pick a normal cybersecurity company because everyone thinks cybersecurity is cybersecurity. But traditional cybersecurity, number one, the risk methodology I talked about is very different, and the requirements are very different than medical device cybersecurity. The FDA wants to see a test plan, test cases, and a test report, and you have to do iterative testing with the manufacturer to make sure they fix the stuff you identify and get it down to an acceptable level. Traditional companies don't do that, cybersecurity companies. This is a little bit busy, but this is a good resource. If you go to OWASP.org, you can look at DevSecOps. So there's this movement to add security into things. There was just development. So developers develop things in a vacuum. And then they delivered it to operations and it didn't align properly. So then we went to DevOps. We're like, okay, let's tie operations with development. So we're developing together. So we develop a prototype, operations says it works, they give feedback, and then oh wait, we forgot about security. So then we're like, oh, maybe we should do DevSecOps. So now we develop it, We develop in conjunction with operations, and we develop it in a secure manner. And what this involves is what's called a secure pipeline. So as you're developing software and various releases, you run it through a series of tests. So when it comes out at the end, it should automatically be secure. This is building cybersecurity into it. And if you go to this OWASP, you can just search for OWASP DevSecOps. They have a massive playbook on this, which will greatly help you increase your secure software development. But it has things there such as scanning the repository or the code for hard-coded credentials. We still see hard-coded credentials in source code. And sometimes people borrow code from somewhere else and they leave the credentials in there. It talks about static application security testing. So I'm scanning the code for bugs before I actually run the code, looking for logic flaws and things like that. And then software composition analysis is doing that SBOM we talked about. So before I get to the very end, I'm automatically assessing the risk in an iterative manner to see what it is and fix it sooner than later. Because it seems like a hassle to have all this stuff in place, but it is less expensive than waiting to the very end. The fifth item is third-party penetration testing. A lot of people skip penetration testing or they try to do it internally. The FDA requires a third-party, independent party to do the penetration testing. So what is penetration testing? Penetration testing is where white hat hackers, like my team, we're white hats, which are the good guys, we emulate and use the same tactics as the bad guys, which are black hat hackers. So we try to break into the device every method possible. And sometimes this is even dismantling the device, it's plugging into every single port, it's every single connection, Bluetooth, NFC, Wi-Fi, it doesn't matter. Every single entry point, like I talked about, we try to get through the entry point, through the trust boundary, into the system to do something nefarious, like alter the integrity, steal the intellectual property, cause the device to shut off, cause it to give a misdiagnosis, etc. And there's some confusion about penetration testing versus vulnerability testing. Penetration testing is the most comprehensive and accurate. Vulnerability testing is basically just identifying vulnerabilities. Penetration testing is identifying the vulnerability and then exploiting that vulnerability and going one step further to see what else you can get. It's sort of like vulnerability testing for your house would be, you notice a couple doors are unlocked, a couple windows are unlocked, you say, that's it, right? Penetration testing would be, I'm gonna go through that door and realize, oh, you have a safe over there with $1 million in it, a bunch of jewelry and a bunch of guns, for instance. And that's unlocked, by the way. So now you have a better understanding of the true risk. Same thing with medical devices, same concept. So you have to use a third party, as I mentioned, and it should be a firm that specializes in medical device cybersecurity. I keep reiterating that because it's extremely important, and it's frustrating for me when clients come to us and they had another firm test their stuff that did not understand medical device cybersecurity. So I know it's frustrating for them because they spent all this money, all this time, and they didn't get the result they wanted. And as I mentioned, engage early and often. You don't have to wait to the very end to do a penetration test. You can do it in an iterative manner. Just like we talked about with that pipeline and secure software development, penetration testing should be part of that too. So wrap up here, some key takeaways. Start early at the design phase so you can avoid redesign work. Keep cybersecurity through every phase, so design to disposal. Even when you're disposing of that device, it needs to have a secure way of disposing it so PHI is not leaked. An attacker can't bite off of eBay and find out a way to attack your new version of your device. Stay transparent. The SBOM helps with that transparency. So if I'm a consumer of your device, I know all the third-party software that makes up your device. I have a right to know that. Just like if I buy a car, I should know who makes the engine, who makes the brakes, who makes the tires. I should know this stuff. It should not be a secret. Focus on patient safety. We talked about that. The risk methodology has to align with patient safety. Validate security with third party. And then this is a continuous process. Even during your software development, you may have developed something like release 0.1, and then 6 months later, a vulnerability could be discovered in that code. So this is a continuous process because attackers are constantly looking for new ways to break into your system. And the cyber criminals, unfortunately, in most scenarios are better than the people defending the network. And like I said, software developers don't understand cybersecurity. So next step, start considering cybersecurity today in your device. Even if you're in the design phase or prototyping phase, just at least start thinking about it. And that will help you get your device cleared much faster. All right, I'll open up to some questions. Yes. Well, I think he wants to have the mic over there real quick.
Talk to the microphone. But anyway, so in your experience, are hospitals like waking up in terms of their security? I worked for a company that 5 years ago was implementing a robotic endoscopy, cancer treatment type device. And we pulled the data off that device right to the cloud. And that was, they're okay with it because it was one way out. The device won't accept any data in. There's, it's pretty hardened in that regard. But like remote security updates, I mean, you talked about the third party and updating all the software, open source, all that stuff. And we found at the time that it was so difficult to try to accomplish that we just sent field engineers physically to update all the machines every time we came out with a new version. So I'm just curious about, like, that was 5 years ago. I don't know how it is now, but.
Okay, so hospital environments are still horribly unsecure. We consider them hostile environments for a medical device. And the challenge, like you said, is there's requirements to remotely patch something, remotely update it. And how do you do that? Because you also have to make sure your infrastructure, if you're a medical device manufacturer, is secure. We've had people where their remote update infrastructure was connected to their corporate network. So the HR person that clicked on a phishing email could infect all of their devices remotely that are fielded. So the result often is like what you said. They send a field tech out there, but that's expensive. So I see some progress in securing these remote updates. I do not see any progress in hospital environments becoming more secure. We used to do penetration tests for hospital environments. There has not been a single hospital we have not been able to take full ownership of. Out of, probably 50 of them.
Are there any particular considerations you recommend for standalone software as a medical device, or even where you could have multiple, let's say, software modules in one product, and maybe we're following the multiple function guidance and pieces are non-medical and pieces are medical?
Any methods for like a software as a medical device to make it more secure?
I mean, are there, besides from everything you explained, are there any special or different considerations for software as a medical device or modular software? Yeah,
so what we've noticed a lot of people do that are fairly secure with software as a medical device or SAMD is they put it in a Docker container. And a Docker container makes it portable and more able to restrict what it can do. So they modularize it in the Docker containers. And then when they field it, they tell the client that they have to have a mechanism to run these Docker containers. It sounds like you've seen that too. Yeah.
Hello. I had a question on threat modeling. Would you recommend like a frequency on like how often do you do the refreshing? Like, would it be like twice a year? I know the expectation is to like continuously monitor for threats and like, based on like the severity you would go and update, but if there's like, no signals, like what's like a typical like, frequency of like, you would update it?
A typical frequency for threat modeling, so we handle it in like 3 ways, I guess. The first way is for post-market monitoring. We monitor for vulnerabilities that come up. So if a new vulnerability pops up, we're alerted instantly, like in a second, and then we will assess what that threat can do to the system. So we wait, if that comes up, then we address it. There's also this thing called the known exploitable vulnerability database. We monitor that. And what that means is there's a vulnerability that exists today, but nobody may have come up with a good way of exploiting it, or it's very difficult. But tomorrow, somebody could figure out a way to make this very simple. Now this makes it to where almost everybody can exploit this vulnerability. So that requires us to reassess the threat model as well. And then the other 2 instances are if there's an iteration, a material change to the device, and then at a minimum annually. So those are what we offer, yeah. Sure.
Any more questions? I'd just be interested just to hear a little bit more. I mean, overall, in recent years, I mean, you said like they're taking it more seriously at FDA and medical device companies. I mean, are we finally reaching the point where, this isn't like an afterthought, for device companies?
I think we're evolving there. It's still an afterthought for many manufacturers. They wait to the very end, and they're forced to do something. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't care about cybersecurity unless they're forced to do it. So it's still an afterthought, but I think all this forcing of people to do it is actually starting to make people be a little more proactive. Yeah, especially in the medical device industry.
It's kind of unfortunate, but I guess as the recalls build up, as we unfortunately get more of these stories. I mean,
well, it becomes a return on investment thing, right? If you can't get your device to the market, then it forces you to do something because it costs money every day your device is delayed from the market. Or if your device is recalled because of vulnerability, again, that costs you money. And it also damages your reputation. So instead of picking the St. Jude pacemaker, somebody may pick a different model pacemaker now. So yeah.
How much do you think this is going to push more device companies to, have more partnerships with high-tech companies that they might be hoping get it, I guess, kind of the argument okay, we're going to base everything on Amazon Web services or whatnot. I mean, is that going to fuel that trend, or are they missing out because they're working with high tech companies that really don't, as you said, kind of get that medical device space?
I think that's a trend, at least for us. Once we get our foot in the door with a large manufacturer, we have a couple of Fortune 500 ones, they start having us reassess all of their products, because they realize they didn't field these products securely and they didn't design them securely. So once we're in the door, and we kind of it's a lot of cybersecurity is awareness and education. Once we kind of shine the light in the dark areas and the cockroaches scatter, they're oh, there's probably some over there. Maybe we should go check out that device too. And then they have us retroactively go over everything. Because one of the other challenges is all these legacy devices. What do we do with those things that are kind of grandfathered in? Pretty soon, those are going to have to be addressed as well.
Or someone's thinking about acquiring them, and in the due diligence, they do the cybersecurity analysis, and then they make that as a high risk factor for the company and maybe not acquire it?
Yeah, we actually help PE firms. It's another side business we do. We help PE firms assess a company they want to acquire from a cybersecurity perspective. So they have a true understanding of the risk involved with that acquisition, because a lot of times they're acquiring a software as a service platform and they want to know what the cybersecurity risks are of that platform, because it could make them not decide to purchase that company. Yep. It's a big deal today. Yep.
Well, I think we're pretty good here. So thanks a lot, Christian. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.